Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Conflict Isn't the Enemy, Turning Project Tension into Progress, presented by our Head of Management Solutions here at Educate 360, Brent Nair. My name is Mariela Salinas, and I'll be assisting and moderating our session today. We are in Zoom for today's webinar, and we will be sharing a copy of this recording with you in an email after the webinar. We do encourage participation throughout the session, so please use the chat or that Q&A option for our Q&A after the presentation. Educate 360 is so excited to present this webinar today. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Brent.
Thanks, Mariella. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be talking about one of the softer parts of project management, although conflict doesn't seem to be soft. I'd like to start off with a poll, and the poll is, Mariella, are we ready? Okay, dealing with conflict. Question, how many of you have trouble dealing with conflict? Yes, no, or sometimes. And I realize we're not being specific on the type of conflict, but let's just say in general, conflict around your project or projects.
Awesome. I'll give us about 5 more seconds. And here are the results.
Awesome. Okay, great. So sometimes, yeah, I agree. Sometimes yes, and a few no's. It's an interesting issue, and it's something that we all deal with as project managers. Whether it's a conflict when we're working with someone on the job site or in a conference room, and we're talking about how long is it going to take to do this task, or I need to borrow Mariella to work on this project, and we negotiate. And sometimes those negotiations come into conflict. Well, today what we're going to talk about is really understanding conflict in projects, to begin with. And we can have task conflicts, relationship conflicts, and process conflicts. I know for me, growing up, I grew up in a household where conflict was not a good thing. Usually, if there was conflict, you were trying to get out of the room as quick as possible because if not, you were hurt either emotionally or physically. And the reason I bring that up is because when we come into the workplace, we bring that with us. We bring those um, stressors. We bring the way that we were conditioned to handle conflict with us. And we're not aware of that. No one asks, how were you taught to deal with conflict? No one, we don't bring that up. And as we go through and begin to develop the team, engage our stakeholders, and various things, we get into conflict, and conflict occurs. I mentioned already task conflicts, relationship conflicts, or process conflicts. Are there any other types of conflicts that I haven't identified on this slide that might be something that might be a conflict that you have or have seen or witnessed that are not could not be put into these buckets? So if you want to just put something in chat for a quick minute, please feel free to do so. And then Marielle, if you can, once they come up, if you can tell me what we see. Any responses? Nope. Okay.
We
Well,
have a couple
okay,
coming in
great.
the chat. It looks like financial conflicts,
Ah, yeah.
professional, hierarchical, priority has come up a couple times. Lots on the priorities process and resource and schedule.
Yes.
Ooh, lots of awesome,
Yeah.
awesome
Thank you.
conflicts. Yeah.
And I think that for the sake of brevity, we can lump a lot of those into each of these buckets. So as we go through today, we're going to talk about not specifically how to resolve a financial conflict, but how to resolve a conflict or conflicts in general. Um, and so as we go through, we will go ahead and start to talk about that. So why conflict matters or why conflict management matters. Let's think about that. Well, if we don't manage conflict, it's going to be chaos. We'll have people. I actually have been on a few job sites where I've had individuals where conflict boiled over and led to violence. And that's not a great position to be in as a project manager. Um, with hopefully if we don't manage conflict, we can we'll have issues with scheduling, we'll have issues team morale. People don't want to play on a team where we're fighting or conflict is not managed properly. Our project outcomes aren't successful, so and a myriad of other things. So when we think about conflict and management of conflict, we as project managers walk a tight line, and where do we step in to manage conflict? One of the better tools that I like to use to help the team with this is to use a team charter. And in that team charter, we talk about ways that we'll address conflict. Quick show of hands, if you just raise your hand or click the hand button in chat, how many of you use team charters today and specifically have sections in them that deal with conflict and how you respond to conflict? Marielle, I'll let you give a tally as I continue to go through. Um, Projects are not just about reports and meeting deadlines. It is a relational endeavor. As a project manager, we're entering into a relationship with our stakeholders. We're entering into a relationship with the members of the team. We're entering into relationships with our subcontractors. And we know as part of relationships, conflict happens. And so if we don't manage conflict, then we have issues. So when we think about conflict management, one of the foundations and the biggest foundation of conflict management is active listening. And that can be difficult when I'm being triggered by somebody's screaming at me or being angry at me because something isn't the way they wanted or we're having an issue. I try and calm my nervous system and look at it from their perspective. They're upset. They might be hurt, something like that. So making sure that we create that psychological safe environment. And if it gets too heated, um, we need to excuse ourselves from it. It's okay to be aware that when your point is, and you have to identify that. So emotional intelligence is also a component of this. Being able to regulate emotions, our own, because if we can't regulate my emotion, if I can't regulate my emotion, excuse me, I'm going to have a hard time managing conflict. Um, Communication. When I'm communicating and it's in a conflict situation, I'm using I statements. I think, or I heard. We're being direct and not accusatory or saying something like you or they. We want to be careful about that. And we want to find out that when we're in that conflict, how can we both walk away feeling like we've won, if there is a winner. I mean, that's finding a solution that's good for both of us. And sometimes that solution might mean that I have to give something up. I have to concede, or I have to say, you know what? I'm willing to do this. I think that what's important here is we keep in mind, what do we value? We value the success of the project, both parties. And as we go into active listening, and as we go into communication, and finally into resolution, we want to be able to understand and realize, what am I valuing here? The success of the project, as well as the success of the team and the organization. So keeping that in mind and using that as a way to bring both parties um, to work together. Now, we see a lot of times conflict impacts our timelines. We disagree on something, or we can't decide on something, and that becomes a conflict that impacts our timeline. Keeping in mind the success of the project, what can we do to resolve this timeline disruption to make sure that the project is successful? And a lot of times that means that we have to deal with different parties, and different parties may have a different view of success. So we have to all agree on that clarity around, what does success mean for the project? That is something that we need to do early in the project, because that barometer of success is what we're going to use to measure throughout the whole phase of, or phases of the project, not just in a conflict, but as we go through everything. Budget. Um, Conflict can increase budget. Um, we can have issues where someone is upset about activities or actions, or feeling slighted, or they didn't win, and so they're going to stop work. We've seen that happen. Work stoppages, overt or covert work stoppages. Innovation. Conflict, if we're in conflict, it's definitely not a place to be creative. It's hard to be creative if we're in conflict because we're disagreeing. Bring us back to that point that says, okay, understand you all have different approaches. Let's think about how we can solve this issue. If constructive conflict can help spark that innovation, as long as we center around that definition of success. And lastly is team cohesion. Team cohesion and psychological safety go hand in hand. And if we don't feel we don't feel well thought of, if the ideas that we bring up are shot down immediately, if people call us dumb doo-doo poopy heads or things like that, we want to make sure that we address that for that team cohesion. Team charters are awesome ways to make sure that everyone knows this is how we play, this is how we work together. And that should be defined not by you as the project manager, by the team. Maybe you have some points that are your non negotiables. Put that into the team charter. Um, all of these are ways, that these four items can impact the goals. And so, how can we work together to bring us back to that definition of success? I mentioned already establish your ground rules, team charter, implement an early warning system. When I think about an early warning system, I think about what's a trigger. How do I know that we're having issues? If you're in an agile project environment or a hybrid project environment, we have daily stand ups. During that 15 minutes that we're having our stand up, what are the issues? Do we have a safe enough place to say, hey, I have an issue? Can I bring it up? At least let it be brought up. Make sure that if in a predictive or traditional project, you should be having a lot of one-on-ones. You should be talking to the different subs. You should be talking to the different folks that are part of the team and saying, how's everything going? Just want to do a quick check-in. Any issues that I need to be aware of? If you have weekly project meetings, that should be your first topic: issues, risks, etc. Going around the room and having everybody give a status report on what they worked on last week, that can be done in writing. In your team meeting, ask people, what are your issues? What are your constraints? What are we having problems with? Now, of course, that means that you have to lay that psychological safety foundation early in the project. Most of us don't feel comfortable about bringing up problems that we have with another team member in public. Unfortunately, because of that, it usually causes a massive explosion at some point in time. So we need to be able to, one, if I have an issue with Mariella, I'm going to reach out to Mariella first. And if Mariella and I can't come to a resolution, I'm going to go to the project manager and I'm going to say, hey, Mariella and I are having a conflict over this. We're trying to resolve it. We'd like some help. Doesn't mean that I'm not effective. It just means that we've come to an impasse and it's better to have an arbitrator or a third party in there to help. And then, of course, we want to document and share the learnings. Hey, how many of you in your lessons learned, and you can put it in chat, yes or no, how many of you in your lessons learned of a project, you list conflicts and how they were successfully managed? That is a treasure trove of information that can be shared with other project managers. Couple of conflict resolution styles, four of them. Competing. If you're competing, you want to have a quick decision. So let's see, where do we want to go for lunch today? No, I want burgers. No, I want Chinese. No, I want pizza. Somebody makes a decision quickly. Of course, that might damage a relationship because it's like, how come my choices never get made? Compromising. Compromising a lot of times, I think we may have bad uh, uh, ideas around what compromising means. Means that oh, we're both giving something up, so that means we're both losers. Well, that's not true. It can create that situation. It depends upon how you, as the project manager, approaches it. I think that compromising is one where if we're at an impasse, then we both have to say, all right, we need to be successful for the project. What needs to happen here? Collaborating, collaborating, of course, is the most effective. If I had to say the best, then we can take that. Now, it depends on the situation. It is time consuming. Um, and then, of course, avoiding. There are times when to avoid, uh, especially if the situation is heated or if individuals are angry. Um, let's avoid the situation, come back to it, table it, so to speak. Say, hey, let's go walk around the block, whatever the case may be, and then come back to it. Um, if you would, go ahead and put in chat which one of these four might be your go-to. You know, which one of these do you usually or do you always go to? I'd love to hear that. And there's no right or wrong because it's dictate your solution or your conflict resolution strategy and style depends upon the situation. Now, with that, keep in mind that as we're looking for this, the biggest thing here, of course, is focus on the problem, not the person, not the people. Focus on the problem. Keep in mind, what do we want to be? What is success? Brainstorm. If possible, brainstorm a couple of solutions. Sometimes we can create an amalgam of a couple of solutions or two or three solutions. Use objective criteria, not suppositions or not what you suppose if you can. Um, be careful if you're brainstorming. Make sure that everyone gets a say. Not the loudest voice wins. Sometimes that in itself can lead to a conflict because some people will dominate a conversation. And then lastly, make sure you formalize that agreement. Document it. This is what we agreed to. This is what we're going to do. In some cases, it might be a contractual change. And so follow your organization's contracting rules and regulations. But these are several of the practical techniques and solutions. Um, back to you, back to us as the project manager. I mentioned already emotional intelligence. You have to understand your own emotions. Um, it took me a little while to become comfortable with conflict. Uh, make sure that you communicate clearly, keeping in mind, I know I'm stressing it, but what is success for the project? What does it look like? No blame, no judgment. Active listening. Active listening means that we paraphrase, that we understand. If we need clarity, we ask for clarity. Sometimes in a conflict situation, people are speaking rapidly. We may need to say, could you repeat that? Slow down. I missed something here. And lastly, neutrality. You're an impartial person here. Your job is to be the mediator or arbitrator. And as such, you need to be active in your listening, clear in your communication, and understanding your own emotions as you're handling the conflict. So a couple of things to think about. One, as much as possible, keep in mind what it is to prevent miscommunication. What are our clear communication channels? Well, Mariella said she was going to do this and she didn't do it. And now I'm upset with her because it means I've got to do the work. So I feel put off. Did Mariella know that this was her task? Those are questions to do. Once you see the conflict, address it. Once you hear about the conflict, address it. Be prompt. And then lastly, learn from what you've done. Learn from what you've done. I wanted to go ahead and leave a few minutes for questions. I realize we just drank from the conflict management, conflict resolution fire hose, to use that metaphor. So, Mariella, I'm going to open it up for questions if we have any.
Absolutely, Brent. I will go ahead and give our audience a little time to throw in any last minute questions or pieces of feedback. I also went ahead and dropped a little bit of info in the chat.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Some more info about the PMP course, just in case anyone wanted to read up a little bit more. We have a question coming on.
Oh, yeah. I
How
see.
do you deal with conflict you only hear through the grapevine? Great question.
Yes. That unfortunately, that's how I usually hear about conflicts a lot of times, is that so and so is having conflict. For me, what I do is I first off I talk to probably each of the parties. If it's two parties, I talk to them individually and determine what the conflict is, and then offer suggestions to both of them and allow them to go back and see if they can resolve it. And then I follow up. So that's how I deal with conflict through the grapevine, excuse me. What's the toughest situation you've been in that you felt was a bit challenging, and what was your report? Um, I would say the most challenging one when I was on a job site when I mentioned that we had two individuals that broke into a fist fight. That was the most challenging for me. My approach was one to break it up. I pointed to somebody and else, and I said, "Hey, let's get in here. Let's break this up." Hollered, did whatever I needed to do to separate it. Adrenaline is very high when violence is around, and so we separated them, of course, and then dealt with it. At that point in time, it became an HR issue because of violence at the workplace. So I stepped away from it. Um, I hope that answered your question, and I think that one was from uh, uh, Gabrielle. And so, Sandy, how do you deal with conflict that involves your management or your superiors? um, and Sandy, I'm going to ask a follow up. Does that mean the conflict is between my superior and me and my superior, or between two superiors that are fighting? Sorry, a clarifying question there. Both. Okay. So if it's me and my superior, um, I I need to I come out and I'll say, I think we're having a disagreement on this issue. How can, and I'll be forthright and I'll say, how can we come to what's best for the project? I think we have different views. I'd like to discuss it and try. I want to understand more about your perspective. That's what I start with if it's me and if it's just between myself and a superior. Um, if it's two superiors that seem to have a conflict, um, a lot of times I'll talk to them again individually and just say, I noticed that Mariella and Brent I noticed that you're disagreeing on this. In order for the project to move forward, in order for the project to be successful, we need to resolve this conflict or this disagreement. I may not say conflict, I may say disagreement. And then again, bring them to how do we do what's best for the project. Um, Paul, sorry, Maya, what about it when it isn't violence, but somebody keeps cutting you off in meetings? Well, first off, we have in our team charters already that you're not allowed to cut somebody off in meetings. So I do that. We address it in the team charter. If someone keeps cutting someone off in meetings and I'm leading that meeting, I'm facilitating, I bring that up. I say we need to let everyone complete their thoughts, complete their before we interrupt because we all second nature want to jump in and interrupt and say, "Oh, I think you're crazy." No, we don't say that, but you know what? Some people do. Uh, we want our point to be heard, and so we need to wait our turn. Sometimes I've had to say, "Look, we need to implement Robert's Rules of Order." Let's see. Um, how do you resolve a situation that involves executive leadership or your manager regarding they don't match? I think I may have addressed that, but let me come back to it, Praga. The biggest thing is to say, here's my understanding of a success. Here's what I see you're saying, and here's what I see leadership saying. How do we get those two to match? How do we get those two to come together? So it's a discussion, and it's a scary discussion, especially if you're dealing with someone that's a senior vice president or someone that has been around. But just say we want this to success, and that's why it's so important for leadership to have a clear foundation of success for the project. So we all know that should be in the charter, hopefully. Um, Let me see. Susan, you don't take prisoners. Um, when do you throw in the towel? Um, I don't know if I ever throw in the towel. If I need to, I will involve someone else. So if we're unable to do it, I will involve someone else, whether it's from HR or an outside agency. One of the things that I recommend that always to project managers is if you can, take a conflict resolution class. Of course, we offer conflict resolution. I think it's important. I'm fortunate, I believe, because I have a master's in counseling. So I was a counselor for a while before I moved into project management and education. So I have some of the tools. It doesn't mean it makes it easier every time I do it, though. And there are times when I need to ask for help. Um, yes, but how do you govern someone who doesn't come up for air? Well, first off, I don't control or govern. I work with them. There's a definition. At some point in time, I might, at the end of the meeting, pull them aside and say, I really value your opinion, and we need to make sure that others in the room are heard. Right now, you're monopolizing the conversation and not allowing others to speak. We have a limited amount of time to do what we're doing, so I need your help with that. I value your opinion if you can be a little more brief in what it is. So maybe that's something, uh, Peter, to do. Kelly, currently working on an infrastructure project. They don't believe in team charters. What's next? Don't call it a team charter. Call it how you run your meetings. Put that in your agenda. These are the rules of the meeting. Everyone has to weigh in before we make a decision. Everyone gets a turn. We don't interrupt, things like that. That's a way to start. Did I answer everybody's question? Something about PDUs. When we finish with this training, how do we take credit for our PDUs? Um,
I can address that
yeah,
super
yep.
quickly. So when we report our PDUs, you can list out where you learned it, how you learned it in the back end. When you list it out under ways of working, or when you categorize the PDU, it's going to be half a PDU, so it's going to be zero point 0.5 PDUs, ways of working, and then you can link to this recording of this webinar, which will absolutely be sent after the session. So yeah, just a quick
Thank you, Mariella.
TLDR, of course, anytime you attend a webinar like that, that is how you will report it in the back end. And I know we are a little over, so just
Marielle, can I answer one or two of the questions that we didn't get to yet?
yes, absolutely. If we can, yeah, if everyone here
Sorry.
is cool with hanging out. No, no worries. Just want to be so
Okay.
mindful.
Yeah, I wanted to, Paul, come back to the timeout. Also wanted to, yeah, Vlad, you can call it boundary guidelines. I think that's a great, another way to say it. Paul, timeout. So let me scroll back up for the question. Sorry. Um, have you ever put someone in timeout as part of conflict resolution? Um, Yes, but I haven't made them go sit in the corner. So I think what I've done when I say time, when I'll, and here I'm asking a question about timeout. Does that mean that you've separated them? If so, yes, I've done that. I've definitely separated folks as a result of that. So that's what I mean. If that's what you mean with timeout. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, everybody. So yes, I've separated them, and I've that's the extent of what I can do, and what I've done for my timeout is I've separated them from a meeting, and I said, hey, I want you to go ahead and take a break or whatever. Um, all right. Thanks, everybody. I've really enjoyed
Excellent.
it. Thank you for the great feedback. I love all the comments in chat, and I hope you all have an awesome day and a great week.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And just as a quick heads up, if you missed out on any part of the session, we will absolutely be sending you the rest of this in an email after the webinar. So thanks again for joining us. And thank you, Brent, for all of your amazing insight as per usual.
Thank you, Mariella.
Alrighty.
Have a good day.
Thanks again, everyone. Hopefully, we'll see you all very soon in the classroom. But for now, have a fantastic week. Bye for now.